Today, we dive into a heartbreaking and unexpected moment that has left fans of Ben Shephard stunned, shaken, and holding their breath. Ben, known across the UK as one of daytime television's most beloved presenters, suddenly found himself at the center of a deeply troubling medical emergency, one that unfolded far from the cameras, in the stark stillness of a hospital room, where everything changed in an instant. But it wasn't just Ben's condition that shocked the public. It was the sight of his wife, Annie Shephard, usually calm, thoughtful, and quietly composed, leaving the hospital in visible tears. For years, the couple have been admired as one of the most steady and grounded partnerships in British television. But what witnesses saw that day painted a far more fragile and deeply emotional picture, one that has left fans questioning just how serious Ben's condition truly is. This is the story of what unfolded, what led to that heartbreaking moment, and why Annie's emotional reaction has resonated so powerfully with people across the country. The moment that stopped fans in their tracks. Witnesses outside the hospital described a scene they never expected to see. Annie Shephard, the woman who has stood by Ben through 2 decades of live broadcasting, physical challenges on Ninja Warrior, long filming days, morning starts, and the relentless pace of television, walked out of the hospital with her head lowered, wiping away tears that fell faster than she could hide. Those who saw her said she looked overwhelmed, shaken, and deeply worried. She wasn't accompanied by television crews, stylists, publicists, or anyone who typically surrounds people in the public eye. Instead, she was supported by a close friend who placed a comforting arm across her shoulders as she tried to steady herself. For someone as private as Annie, someone who rarely seeks attention and usually maintains an almost serene sense of calm, this emotional unraveling spoke louder than any statement ever could. Something inside that building had frightened her to her core. And it all began earlier that morning, long before anyone outside the family had the faintest idea that something was wrong. The sudden decline no one expected. According to sources close to the family, Ben had been experiencing a few worrying symptoms in recent days. Nothing dramatic, nothing overt, but enough for Annie to gently encourage him to get checked. Ben, ever the professional, ever the optimist, insisted it was just exhaustion. After all, he had been juggling his relatively new routine on this morning, continuing other commitments, and trying to keep up with his personal fitness and family life. His schedule was demanding, but no more than usual. But this time, things were different. During what should have been a quiet morning at home, Ben suddenly experienced a dramatic worsening of his symptoms. What started as dizziness and shortness of breath quickly escalated into something far more frightening. Annie immediately called for medical help. She was by his side every second until the paramedics arrived, and when they did, they urged her to accompany them, quietly telling her that the situation was more serious than they initially thought. Inside the ambulance, things changed rapidly. Ben, who moments earlier had been speaking in full sentences, suddenly became disoriented. His breathing grew shallow, his responses slowed, and Annie could do nothing but watch as the paramedics worked with fierce urgency around him. She later told a close friend that this was the moment she realized something was terribly wrong, and the fear she felt in that moment was unlike anything she had ever experienced. Inside the hospital, what doctors encountered. When Ben arrived at the hospital, the medical team immediately began a series of emergency assessments. What alarmed them most was not just the suddenness of his symptoms, but how unpredictable they appeared. One moment, he seemed stable. The next, his condition shifted dramatically. Doctors rushed to perform scans, administer oxygen, and run rapid tests to determine what was happening. Annie stayed by his side, gripping his hand, whispering to him, doing anything she could to keep him grounded in the chaos that unfolded around them.
According to those present, she never once stepped away, not to drink water, not to take a call, not to sit or rest. She simply remained there, standing beside the bed, her eyes fixed on Ben, silently pleading for answers. Doctors, meanwhile, exchanged quiet but urgent glances. They were concerned, and their concern was something Annie immediately recognized. Those who know her say she is perceptive to a fault. She reads people with ease, so when she saw the medical team's behavior shift, when she noticed the subtle gestures, the hushed tones, her fear intensified. And that was when things took another turn. Ben, who had been responsive only moments earlier, began drifting in and out of awareness. His speech slurred, his hands trembled, his breathing changed pace in a way that set off alarms across the room. Doctors immediately called for additional support. To Annie, it felt like the floor fell out from under her. She watched in shock as the room quickly filled with specialists, cardiology, respiratory, emergency physicians, each moving with a speed and precision that signaled one undeniable truth. This was serious. One witness said Annie clasped her hands over her mouth in pure fear. Another said she whispered repeatedly, "Please, Ben, stay with me." That was the point at which hospital staff gently advised her to step back toward the wall, giving the team space to work. She obeyed, but never once took her eyes off the man she loved. Minutes passed like hours, and then the medical team asked her to step outside. Not because she was in the way, but because whatever they needed to do next, they didn't want her to witness. That moment broke her. Annie's heartbreaking walk through the hospital corridor. Witnesses described the sight of Annie walking out of the emergency room as one of the most emotional public moments they had ever seen. Her face was red with tears, her hands trembled, she looked completely lost. For a woman who had watched Ben take on some of the toughest physical challenges on national television, for a woman who had supported him through countless early mornings, long filming blocks, injuries, and professional pressures, seeing her like this was profoundly moving. She didn't try to hide her pain. She didn't put on a brave public-facing smile. She simply broke. One hospital staff member said that she leaned against a wall for a moment as though her strength had finally given out. A friend who had rushed to the hospital wrapped an arm around her, helping her steady herself as she whispered that she didn't know what she'd do if she lost him. It was raw, it was real, it was the kind of emotional outpouring that no one could mistake for anything other than genuine fear. And then, as she was guided outside for a brief moment of air, that now famous image was captured. Annie wiping tears from her cheeks, her face pale, her eyes vacant with worry. The world saw it, and the world reacted. The public responds with shock, worry, and love. It didn't take long for the image to spread online. Fans of Ben Shephard, viewers who have watched him for years on Good Morning Britain, Tipping Point, Ninja Warrior UK, and recently this morning, were stunned. Ben, after all, has always seemed like the picture of health. Fit, strong, always smiling, always warm, always energetic. People across social media immediately expressed concern. Not Ben, please let him be okay. He brings so much joy, this is heartbreaking. Seeing Annie like that is terrifying, sending all love to their family. What struck viewers most wasn't just the news of Ben's health scare, but Annie's emotional display. Because this was a woman who rarely steps into the limelight, a woman who protects her privacy fiercely, a woman who is known for her quiet stability. For her to crumble so openly meant one thing. The situation inside that hospital was deeply serious. The family rallies around them. While Annie remained at the hospital, refusing to leave Ben's bedside for longer than a few minutes, close family members stepped in to support their 2 teenage sons. Friends drove to the house to ensure the boys weren't alone. Relatives coordinated meals. Neighbors reportedly offered help with anything Annie might have needed. Those who know the Shephards say the family has always been close-knit, grounded, and remarkably normal despite Ben's public role. And in this moment of fear, that closeness became their strongest asset. But as the hours passed and tests continued, the emotional toll on Annie grew heavier. She was living in a terrifying limbo, waiting, hoping, fearing the worst, praying for the best. Hours turned into a full day, and still Annie would not leave the hospital. Not for food, not for sleep, not for a shower. Her only focus was Ben. The private moment no one saw. Late that night, when visitors had gone home and the hospital corridors had fallen quiet, Annie was allowed back into the room. The monitors beeped softly, the lights were dimmed, the